right. So, Marie, we're moving into part 3 and we're talking a lot more about leveling up. Tell me, what do you think are the biggest challenges that future EX leaders are going to have to face?
Sure. Good question. I think there's quite a few if I think about the challenges, but the one that really stands out for me is it's just the shift in power. There's many leaders and managers are not used to this, where the world is leaning towards a place of almost a democratization of employee views. And by that, I mean that the employee holds a lot of power in influencing decisions and cultures and how things get done. And I think cultures where leaders are not used to that will be a major challenge is going to be that shift in power. And of course, there needs to be a balance. But certainly what we're seeing is that a greater shift towards the employee. So I'll say that's the one. The other one is this gig economy is quite complex, right? And we spoke about it previously.
Yeah.
It's really like desolating and all the moving parts around saying previously people had a role and leaders managed a particular role. Now it's about outsourcing a skill and making sure that those deliverables are met. And it's not within the container of a particular role. So I think all those moving pieces might be very complex for leaders to manage, particularly because there is no guide. So it is new, employee experience is new for many people. It's about trial and error. And so I think organizations that are more prone to learning and a little bit more forgiving when it comes to making mistakes are the ones that are going to get ahead, as opposed to those that are looking for a clear, definitive guideline. So I think those two things really stick out for me, the gig economy and certainly the shift of power we see to employees.
Yeah, I agree. I think the shift in power is a very interesting one to me, because I think that it really does go against the way, also in terms of how policies and procedures are structured in a business. It's going to provide quite a lot of challenges and a very much a kind of Carol Dweck growth mindset from a leadership perspective.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And look, and I say this again, is that employee experience is previously it was a nice to have. Now it's a key priority. It's mainstream. It's standard in terms of how businesses are operating. But there isn't a clear guideline. And so it's important that leaders are innovative. They take the blows with the successes. And it's going to be a combination of learnings and trial and error.
Yeah, I think as well, and is something we've been talking about a lot, just as a general, is the expectation of an employee now is really set, especially from a technology perspective, is really set by what's happening out there, in the metaverse and in all these different things. That the expectation of what an employer will be providing is being set by these huge companies and these big external factors that are kind of a business has to keep up with, just because that's the base level expectation. It's quite difficult for a leader to keep up with, a Mark Zuckerberg kind of budget.
No, you're spot on. I think that there is high expectations, but at the core of it, I think all organizations have got a context which they operate in, and it's important that they understand that context. That's probably one of the most important things around what is the listening strategy in terms of what employees want. And how is it unique for that particular context? Because at the end of it all, irrespective of all these sophisticated tools that other organizations may be using, employees at the core of it want 4 basic things. It's a sense of purpose, to enjoy the work that they do, they connect with people and leaders, and they're allowed individual growth and some autonomy. So if you can kind of anchor your solutions in one of those 4 areas, it does not necessarily have to operate in the metaverse, but it needs to be contextual and it needs to meet the employees' needs.
That's a great point and really well made. I think that's the kind of practical advice that EX leaders need to hear. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Cool.
And what are the new skills that you would advise these leaders to learn and master?
Again, if we look back on the past 2 years, what have we learned? We've learned about really connecting with people at a human level. We've learned to be more human-centric. and recognizing that actually it's important to put the employee or the individual at the center of the business. And that of course it's a balancing act. But for me, what I'm getting is that one of the power skills that are coming out is coaching and a great sense of empathy. And over again, that's what we're hearing a lot, is around how do we connect with people at a human level in this very complex digital world.
Yeah.
So I'd say a core skill definitely would be coaching. And then the second one would certainly be understanding analytics. And I say that because organizations are really having to pull a lot of data points and making assessment and then making decisions based on that, particularly in the employee experience space. So I think it's important that leaders understand the human side, but a great sense of the technology and making sense of data would be another core skill. What's another one that comes up for me? Look, if I think about what some of our clients are grappling with,
yeah,
it's really a key skill would be around how do they operate in this hybrid world of work? And I don't think there's any definitive answers, but I think a core skill would be how are we capacitating leaders to operate in this very transformative hybrid world of work? And that would be a sweet spot in terms of upskilling yourself as a leader.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think anyone is quite there. There are no textbooks on this right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. Last year when I ran the Future of EX and we ran season 1, the big trends and the big sort of repetitive themes that came out a lot were on the topics, obviously, of empathy, self-awareness, and then in terms of skills was very much around communication and marketing, which I think was very speaking to where we were in and out of lockdowns. Now that things are emerging and moving a little bit more, I suppose, back to, well, a little bit more ahead, or into a different phase, very much the trend this season thus far has been on analytics and learning, which is very interesting so far for me. Definitely.
Yeah, spot on. And this is actually across the board and not unique to any particular industries that we're seeing that analytics and data is going to play a key role. But of course, leaders must continuously be listening. And that for me takes a great sense of empathy and connectedness with employees.
So if we have a look now, and I'm going to move into our part 4, and if we have a look at diversity and inclusion, how do you think that leaders should incorporate that focus into their strategy?
When it comes to employee experience, look, first I think it's about really delving into diversity and inclusion. And I think many organizations have been quite progressive when it comes to this point around saying it's far more than just representation. It's far more than saying that, statistically, what is the number of representation we have in our business? But it's really around a greater sense of belonging and saying, how are we being inclusive and making sure that that representation is not just the representation, but they're authorized to be able to influence the business and the systems. And actually, I was in a conversation recently with my learning and development colleagues, where they say it's actually transformed. There's now a new acronym. There's always a new acronym, Sally. It's now about JEDI, which is really justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion. But I think sometimes, leaders get consumed with all these new acronyms, but the core bit is around how do they add value by making sure everybody's views is included in a way that is meaningful and is sustainable. So I think for me, it's not about necessarily the answers, but for leaders to think about who else can we have in this conversation? Who systemically is excluded by virtue of where they are in the organization? Who else might give a different view in order to stay away from groupthink? So I think for me, it's about continuously pushing the boundaries around who are we including in the business, but not only are we including them, do they feel they belong, and do they have agency to really make an impact? That's what, for me, some of the practical ways where we can explore around diversity and inclusion.
I think there's such a very westernized lean on DEI and the more Jedi at the moment. And I think that we still need to take the perspective of saying that, you know, in Africa, we have perhaps a richer understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or certainly a different one. And I think that we do need to look at how the African context plays out rather than simply looking at the American or European definitions and ways of learning around that to make a difference here. I find there's a bit of a slant. I don't know if you see that as well.
Absolutely, there's a far greater richness when it comes to diversity in the African space, and we can even bring it down to the South African space, particularly because of our history.
Yeah.
And I always say that, you know, we need to think about the nuance, not just of the country, but the context in which these things exist. I think the idea of diversity and inclusion in some sectors are far more advanced than in others. And that's why for me, when we design these things, it's not about the acronym, but of saying, what is currently playing out in business? You know, what are we seeing? What have we observed? You know, not just to talk the talk, but what is the lived experiences of employees when it comes to some of these things? And simply put, I would encourage leaders to go and seek out that feedback and say, what is the lived experience of employees in our business, particularly those that are traditionally excluded? And so ask about millennials, ask about people in your organization that are part of the LGBTQI community. And if you don't have, then how do you seek out information around those things? Ask about, you know, how are the women feeding in your business, but across the various ethnic groups. So you've got specific nuances to work with, and not just limited into the confines of just an acronym, but the reality of what's really playing out in your business.
Absolutely. And I know we've touched on lots of topics through our many conversations, but if you had to ask our listeners to take away one thing and implement into their employee experience leadership today, that's the one thing they have to do today, what would that one thing be?
What would be the one thing? I think if you haven't crafted a listening strategy, and sometimes it's called a listening tool, but that's just an opportunity for you to get a sense of feedback and content and data from your employees. That's the one thing you should take away when it comes to employee experience, because that's really will give you an assessment in terms of where you need to shift, where you need to move, where you need to change direction, or perhaps it's not about doing anything, but at least getting a sense of what is the lived experience in your business. And I think the one thing I'd say is definitely the listening strategy.
Okay.
And we've got an incredible program called Employee Experience, where we enable leaders to learn specifically around that, around saying, what are some of the listening strategies? How else can you improve and advance the employee experience in your business? And so we would encourage leaders to participate and register for that particular course. It runs over a period of 6 weeks, but fantastic insights, really customized and bespoke to your business and context. So that probably would be the second thing. Is to consider a formal program.
Yeah, and I think there aren't a lot of them out there. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? I mean, is it done in person? Is it online? Is it hybrid? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So it is a 6 weeks program, and it is designed specifically for the context of the organization, where we can do a hybrid. So it is partly online and partly in person. So it's a combination, but based on the context of the organization, it can be done fully in person or fully online. Although, you know, the more advanced way of learning nowadays is to have the duality of both.
And who would you recommend in a business went through that program in terms of, you know, would it just be for Exco? Would it be for different levels of management? Tell me more about that.
No, I think the program is customized towards anybody that is involved in the key touch points of the employee experience. So not necessarily you don't have to be a leader, as long as you're influential in the system, or even as an employee, if you want to improve and better the experience of your organization, you can enroll for that.
Oh, that sounds so cool. And so how best can our listeners connect with you or register or find out more?
So they can have a look at our website or send an email to consult@imssa.co.za. And they can find out more about the program, but it is available on our website through our network partner, World View Academy. I will gladly send you some more information as well if
Yes.
our viewers would like to see that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I'll put it into the post as well so that everybody can click through and go and have a look. But that sounds awesome. Thank you.
It's a fantastic program, and we've received such fantastic feedback, particularly from those who have attended.
Okay, great. And I know that you do a lot of other speaking engagements and you do a lot of talks. How can our listeners connect with you personally or hear more from you as an individual? Because you speak on a lot of different subjects.
So you're welcome to have a look at my LinkedIn page where a lot of the content is shared there. But for speaking engagements, again, you are welcome to email consult@IMS SA. I'm always very interested to hear what is going on in other people's business and then customize what we share to their environment. And on Instagram, it's Marie Sibueng. And on all the social networks, in fact, you can just have a look at marie.sibueng and it should come up.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Oh, Marie, thank you so much for all of your time. And I really appreciate it. I know that between you and I and rainstorms and fire drills, we had a hard time getting our time together, but I really want to thank you for putting in the time and chatting with me. I really, really appreciate it and all of the insights that you've shared.
Thank you. It was absolutely fantastic. I'm glad we've actually been able to coordinate it and do this interview. It's been a long run to get to this point.
It has. People will never know our struggles.